So, okay. My name is Costanza, and I'll be talking about decentralized storage and zero-risk communications. A little bit about me. I work for the Swarm Foundation, a decentralized and censorship-resistant storage and communication network. The focus today, it is PSS messaging. So how that enables to have communications that can be leaked. Someone before said that the NSA can track everything down. Maybe we can talk about it later. So before I start, a disclaimer. First of all, I'm not a lawyer, and this talk is not legal advice. And also, I'm not a coder, so do your own research. So without further ado, today we're going to see, first of all, a small personal anecdote on why I care about privacy, why it is important to me personally. Then we will see the Swarm networks and the key elements that are fundamental to the Swarm network, and how those elements come into play to generate zero-risk communication. So let's start. Why do I care about privacy? First of all, because it is universal. But what does it mean? I have a background in anthropology, and privacy, as we know it, it is not universal, because every culture has a different view of what should be private and what can be public. Also, the concept of privacy is ever-evolving. As technology and surveillance technologies unfortunately advance, things that we used to take for granted are no longer private. But nonetheless, every culture values keeping some things private. And what is private and what is not should be up to you and not to the NSA. Second, there is no freedom without privacy, and this goes without saying. And finally, because it's so fucking easy to break it, my father was a cartoonist, a satirical cartoonist, a very dangerous threat to the nation, you know? And for this reason, we often had our mobile and landline under surveillance. Whenever I would call him, there were like normal rings, then there was a weird sound, and then again, normal, two. Now, that was super easy to spot because it was in the 90s, early 2000s. And so it was very easy. And just because the police were monitoring him, they will know everything about my teenage crush. And that was kind of like freaking me out. But also like I feel super bad for the police officer that was monitoring me because I was super lame. Yeah. So, you know, the government needed to monitor him because they need to protect us from terrorism and dangers. And this is an example of why my father was considered dangerous. So today I'm going to speak about how Swarm enables zero-risk communication thanks to the PSS messaging. Swarm is a decentralized communication and storage system. It provides a scalable and self-sustaining infrastructure for a supply chain of data. A bit of context. PSS is the whisper version of BDZ, the voiceless and hard-to-hear sound of BDZ. And it also pays homage to Whisper, the Ethereum's original dark messaging protocol that was part of the Holy Trinity back in 2014 with Ethereum, Whisper, and Swarm. Before going into that, we will see a few key elements of Swarm that are fundamental to achieve zero-risk communication. So we will explore B-nodes, the basic building blocks of the Swarm networks. We will see chunks. Chunks are the smallest unit of data in Swarm. When a file is uploaded on the network, it gets divided into small chunks, and each chunk is stored in multiple B-nodes. So even if one or more B-nodes are compromised, the data will still be available. And finally, we will see the academia routing, which sounds like a bad word. It is a distributed hash that it is used to find the location of chunks in the Swarm network. So the tagline here is that Swarm achieves zero-risk communication by storing encrypted chunks of content in the bin nodes that communicate using the Cadena routing and mixing them up. So what does it mean? So the bin nodes. Swarm is a peer-to-peer network. There is no single node controlling the network, and each one of us can run their own node. Each node is assigned an address, which is distinct from the network address. And nodes are grouped into neighborhoods. So you can configure your bin nodes into 4-way: the gateway mode, the ultralight, the light, and the full node. Now, the gateway and the ultralight, they don't allow for PSS messaging. The light node allows for PSS messaging, but you don't participate fully in the network. And the full node is the best way to join the network because it allows full functionalities. Chunks. So in Swarm, when we upload the chunks from a file to a website to a video, it is split into small chunks, and they are split all across the world. Two important things. Each chunk of data is addressable via a hash, and it is distributed to more than one node, so it is redundant by default. And when you upload a file, you can decide whether to encrypt it or not. So if a requester is authorized to access a chunk, it must be in possession of the decryption key, while unauthorized parties cannot. So this is the encryption scheme, and it is designed to be independent of the chunk store layers. That means that the same infrastructure can be used to store both encrypted chunks and unencrypted chunks. The only difference is that for one, you need the encryption key. And that has three main advantages. The first one is that it is easy to switch between encrypted and non-encrypted data. The second one is that it is possible to use the same chunk to store for both public and private data. And finally, it reduces the amount of code to be maintained and written. So the Cadena routing. The Cadena routing ensures that each node connects to a specific subset of nodes in a way that it gets efficient. This is very important. So for the nodes who serve the chunk, it is not possible to find out who is requesting a given chunk or who is storing a given chunk. So in this way, you have ambiguity of context, and you don't have leaked metadata, providing with what we call plausible deniability. So how does it work? In step one, you have the message that it goes to the peer that is known to be the nearest. And in the same way, in step two, it goes and it moves forward. So in this way, there is no way to know where the request is coming from and where the request is originating. So you can have zero-risk communication, browsing, and publishing. So now that we have the building blocks, time to see how the zero-risk communication works. PSS provides for a pub/sub facility that can be used for a variety of tasks. Nodes are able to listen to messages received for a specific topic in the nearest neighborhood and create messages that are destined to be in another neighborhood using Swarm data dissemination protocol. And to do so, we have 4 keywords: encryption, Troyan chunks, handshake, and anonymous mailbox. So Trojan chunks, why do we need them? So we say that linking the sender from the recipient is impossible, but like someone spoke about it before, there is traffic analysis that can give you away. So in order to overcome that, you need a very high volume of traffic or fake traffic. So what happens in Swarm is that it masks the messages as normal chunk traffic and obfuscate the act of messaging itself. In other words, find Waldo. So how does it work? Here we have Dave, that wants to send a message to Alice. Dave knows the public key of Alice, and he encrypts the message using Alice's public key. They wrap the message in a Trojan message and obtain the cybertext payload of the Trojan chunk with the asymmetric encryption. Then Dave finds a random once, and the destination target is a bit sequence that represents the neighborhood where Alice belongs. So Dave uploads the chunks to Swarm, and it gets synchronized to Alice's neighborhoods. How does Alice receive the message? Alice only knows that a chunk is a Trojan message, is a PSS message, if and when she opens the Trojan message with the private key corresponding to the public key that Dave knows. And she does an integrity topic matching. Forwarding nodes, so anyone in between Alice and Dave have no idea to know whether that was a Trojan message or whether that was a random encrypted message. So communication in that way is perfectly obfuscated as generic chunk traffic. So in the sense, we can say that Trojan chunks allows you to have disguised traffic. Encrypted messages are disguised like any normal piece of traffic, and that makes it virtually impossible for third parties to track or intercept messages. Because to an observer, the encrypted PSS messaging looks like any other piece of innocent and innocuous Swarm traffic. Anonymous mailbox. So if Alice is not online, then the chunk will prevail, like any other chunk, depending on how much is being paid to stay on the Swarm network. So in other words, the Trojan message provides asynchronous mailbox functionalities without any further action from Dave. And the handshake, when Alice meets Dave. Encrypted communication requires a handshake at the very beginning in order to agree on the initial parameters that are used as inputs to the symmetric key generation scheme. So the protocol is set out to allow two parties to establish a shared secret. The shared secret forms the input used to determine the encryption key, which will be used during the post-handshake two-way messaging. So again, we have Dave that starts the communication with Alice, and we have Alice that advertises the information necessary for Dave to be in contact. To have zero-risk communications, you need first to perform a handshake to establish the seed key, and then to feed the indexing methodology used. So after that, we have a pre-K bundle, aka all the information that Dave needs to know about Alice. So Dave needs to invite Alice to an outbox feed private communication channel. And the first step to do so is to ask for her public pre-key bundle feed and send an initial message to say, hey, I want to communicate with you. So after that, they shares the parameters required to initiate the encrypted communication, the public key of its long-term identity, and the public key generated only for that conversation. And those details are delivered to Alice by sending a Trojan chunks. Now, both parties have all the ingredients that they need to generate the triple Diffie-Hellman shared secret, aka the seed key for the double bracket continuous key agreement protocol as used in Signal protocol. This scheme provides forward secrecy and post-compromise security to the end-to-end encryption. And this is important because by adding forward and backward secrecy to the outbox, the communication channel is completely obfuscated. So it gives three components to the messaging: obfuscation, deniability of the channel, and disguise as messages. In other words, we have zero-risk communication. Now, imagine you want to send a secret message to your friend Vitalik, but you don't want anyone else to see it. Here's what you will do. You will issue a stamped address envelope by finding a unique code announced that when it's used to create a special package, has an address close to Vitalik's address. You pay for the postal stamp, and you encrypt the package with a lock that only Vitalik knows, and you wrap it up as a Trojan chunk. Then what happens on Vitalik's side? It receives the Trojan message containing the encrypted package. Vitalik uses the private key to unlock and decrypt the message. Vitalik verifies the postage stamp to ensure that it is valid, and the code represents the address of the package. And they confirm that the code matches their own address to ensure that the package is actually, intended for them. So when Vitalik wants to send you back a message, it will follow those steps. It will encrypt the message with your public key, creating, again, a secret package. They wrap up the package as a Trojan message and create a unique code that generates an address close to yours. They sign the Trojan message using the private key, creating a signature. They package up everything together in a special envelope with a stamp address and a signature. And finally, they send the envelope with a postal stamp to ensure that it gets delivered. And you do the same. You receive the envelope, you verify the postage stamp to make sure that it is actually intended for you, and you open it. And honestly, here you can find my contacts and Swarm contacts. I wish we had this form of zero-risk communication back when I was a teenager. So thank you very much, and thank you all for coming here today.